Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to Season 3 of the Agile World, where we discuss customer and employee experience, organizational and workforce transformation, and how business can adapt and continually improve in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed in this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles, or get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kilstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. I'm excited to introduce the first episode of a special three-part series about the importance of taking the right platform-based cloud approach so businesses can enable MLOps and realize the true value of AI and machine learning. This series is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome the Director of Transformation Services at TEKsystems, Jay Mozo. Jay, first, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and what you do at TEKsystems?
Yeah, good morning, Greg. Thanks. Again, I'm the director over in our transformation services. Obviously, very passionate around helping our customers transform and modernize, for this world that we live in today, right? So, a lot of focus on things like cloud and DevOps is specifically in my background. Been in the industry for we'll just say 20 plus years. But uh, but again, very passionate and really helping our customers really get to that full potential of where they want their business to grow.
Let's start with cloud computing. So, cloud computing has become more and more mainstream. What are your thoughts on the evolution of cloud and its impact on business?
Yeah, Greg. Cloud platforms, right? They're growing so fast, and specifically in the area of just really maturing its services, right? So in from a cloud platform perspective, just thinking of this services economy, right, and all of these matured services that are easy to consume, easy to operate, right? We kind of view that in cloud platforms as the greatest enabler, right? Now, how people choose to leverage those vary, right? We at Tech Systems, um, we have an approach where we focus on, people that are looking at cloud platforms, right? And even though it's mainstream, there's still many companies still kind of looking at how to do cloud, right, I guess. But we push for a foundation with our customers of focusing on a strategic foundation of business and delivery agility. And Greg, for your listeners, I'll kind of define those, right? For business agility, we define that as how well an organization senses and responds to their customer and to the world. And then we define delivery agility as how well IT senses and responds for the business, right? And we feel like um, even with all of the mainstream hype, right? If companies focus on those two foundational things, their cloud journey, it will keep them on the right kind of path, right?
Yeah.
But definitely the impact on businesses is, you hear about it every day, right? All these companies that are leveraging cloud and all of the great things are coming out of it. Again, we just see it, Greg, as the greatest enabler.
Well, and when we're talking about enterprise IT, the cloud isn't, it's not that it's new, but, when you speak with line of business buyers, what's their perspective on the cloud? Is it assumed that this is the perfect solution that's going to solve everything, or do they tend to be more grounded in expectations? Where are their heads at usually?
We see a bit of both with each buyer, and and honestly, we kind of encourage that, right? These buyers, they have great aspirations due to the possibilities roaming around in their minds, right? As they think about what cloud can do for them, what it can solve for them, right? But we also hear that they're aware of the impacts, right? Which usually grounds them a bit, right? As I mentioned, we do encourage our customers in that way, right? So we encourage them to think big, but also we encourage them to act now, right? Which gives them some immediate reality, right, on their expectations.
What are the biggest drivers for business when it comes to leveraging cloud services?
Depending on the customer, we typically hear a few, Greg. Top of mind, um, with some customers, we hear the desire to stop maintaining their data centers and their hardware and the maintenance for those things, right? So we hear that still, right? And obviously the progression of the adoption enablement of cloud, you see less and less of that every day, but we still hear that, right? That's still a main concern for those customers that are still in that type of mode, right? Um, Also, obviously, cloud platforms simplifies and improves things like disaster recovery and business continuity, which we hear a lot, right? And again, that kind of goes along with that first point that I made, right? It's, now thinking about how do we double all that or triple all that, and how do we think about the complexity with that redundancy and that availability, right? Um,
Yeah.
but Greg, the last one, right, that we really love to dig into with our customers is those that are really interested in the overall business and IT modernization strategy, right? Especially when they're thinking about those targeted goals around modernizing how the business needs to run for the future of their company, right? And what those specific outcomes need to be, right? We've Greg, we've created our own kind of approach dedicated for business modernization journeys, right? As we walk our customers through that, they really get excited and appreciate, where they are now, each progressive step, and also they get excited, every time they get closer to their goals, right? So if they think about the biggest drivers, those tend to be, the things we hear. But again, we really love getting in there with our customers and modernizing their business.
What we read sometimes in in various blogs and articles and things is that while there's a lot of promise there, that often there can be things that go wrong, and throughout these processes, there's a lot of digital transformation is often difficult, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So where are businesses likely to go wrong in their approach to cloud services, and what are some of the common pitfalls that a buyer might fall into?
The first thing that hit me when you asked that question, and I caught it kind of early as you started going down that path. But the first thing that hit me is when we talk to customers that just want to move their workloads to the cloud, and they don't really have a specific reason why, other than they were told to move to the
Yeah.
cloud, or they think it makes sense, right? Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that hits me, right? Because without clear reason and a plan, you really, shouldn't just move things around, right? So, we when we do encounter that, Greg, we just, get with our customer to take a few steps back, focus on business and IT first, like I talked about, right? Business and delivery agility, and then make, sensible decisions from there, right?
Yeah.
Another one too, Greg, I think, um, you know, is when they expect too much from the cloud platforms, right? Or they don't necessarily understand that there's shared responsibility in those models.
Well, and so to that point, and your earlier one, if you just kind of if you're just moving to the cloud because it's the thing to do because everybody
Mhm.
else is doing it, and don't have a clear strategy or set of goals in mind other than so the more tactical aspect of simply moving, there's going to be some challenges. So how do how would you recommend that organizations create the right metrics and the right KPIs measure their progress as they move to the cloud?
We strongly believe in this mindset of measure and align, and obviously to do that continuously, right? When we think of cloud and the measure and align aspect, right, we think of a few major kind of groupings, right? And I'll go through those. There's first, I would say cloud visibility, right? So things like usage, performance, security. Just think of those, Greg, as like the transparency um, around cloud and its usage within an organization, right? And then we'll move people to cloud optimization KPIs. So things around cost, speed, reliability, right? Those things again to kind of see, beyond where they are in terms of usage, but what are they doing with the cloud? How are they optimizing, and how have they matured, right? As cloud platforms mature, organizations need to mature alongside, right?
Yeah.
Um, the third one is cloud governance and automation. So being focused on things like compliancy and consistency, right? And maturing from that perspective, right? Those KPIs are obviously going to be important. And then last, Greg, probably the most important one. And really, when you look at those first three, you need those to kind of help with this last one. But obviously, the last one is going to be around the business impact, right? So, how did we improve our business? What does ROI really look like in terms of the transparency around those other three KPI groupings, right?
Yeah.
But that's kind of where we take our customers to really get a good sense of where they are in the cloud, where they need to go, and then, like I mentioned, continuously measure and align.
And would you say those three categories generally stay the same no matter who you're working with? I mean, the individual metrics and ways of measuring and stuff like that might change, but I mean, are those does that really is that consistent among any organization?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, Greg. Yep.
Yeah,
You got it right. Yeah, basically they're pretty consistent. We look at those things and focus on those things, and then the only things that kind of varies is like you mentioned the last one, the fourth aspect, right, where it's a little bit more catered to the business outcomes.
got it. So when thinking about different cloud-based solutions, let's take machine learning platforms in particular. Who's typically driving that purchase decision, and does it originate with IT or line of business? Um, and what questions should organizations be asking themselves prior to making that often very large decision?
Yeah. Yeah, true. Yeah, we see a little bit of both, but today it's probably still slanted towards IT leaders. Those IT leaders are typically ones that have great business sense, right? And they're thinking ahead for the business, right? So when I mentioned before around being grounded and focused on, out of the gate on business and delivery agility, those IT leaders that are thinking through that, right, and really embracing the idea of how to sense and respond, right, for the business, you'll see IT leaders thinking about things like their data lake strategy, right? Which obviously, is a foundation for things like MLOps, right? So
Yeah,
those IT leaders we're still encountering. They're still kind of thinking ahead and making those decisions. We do encounter some business leaders that they're looking for some specific business feature or outcome, and if they haven't partner with their IT, then we kind of help bring that together, right? But to your point, right? AI and ML platforms are growing at this fast and furious pace, right? And in terms of what they should be thinking about, or questions, right? They should be asking, right? Um, I think customers need to get real with how their business differentiates itself, right? How well are they sense and responding today, right? How they sense and respond for the customers is critical, and again, as cloud is the greatest enabler, AI and ML platforms enables that dramatically. The whole idea of sense and respond.
yeah, yeah. Do you have some use cases or real world examples of how businesses are leveraging ML ops to create value for their customers?
Yeah, Greg, in my career, I mentioned this a little bit on my intro, but I bought in early into DevOps, right? That whole practice and mindset, and I love, to your question, I love the fact that it's growing into other areas, things like MLOps, right? This MLOps movement, right?
Yeah,
I love that just as much, right? And the idea of machine and deep learning engineering, right, and software engineering and continuous delivery and operation, just kind of working together seamlessly and improving in that same method is just beautiful, right? So,
yeah,
in terms of use cases, right, there's so many to speak about, right? We see how industries like healthcare are focused on improving patient health and experience, manufacturing industry leveraging it for efficiency and cost optimization, right? And then even service industries for like better customer insight and engagement, right? The list goes on and on, but again, it's the biggest enabler for how well we can sense and respond, for our customers, right? When I think of MLOps, I had a great conversation with a CIO of a restaurant chain, and over the past few years, they've dramatically turned their business around, right? And that's conversation, I loved a lot because through that conversation I got a true sense of where they were, before they made the switch. And by the way, Greg, their switch is really saying, hey, we're a restaurant chain, but we need to focus and be a technology company. And that
yeah,
mind shift, right, it just kind of helped them focus in, and I would say if we were to score their business and delivery agility, it would be through the roof. But in this conversation with the CIO, he mentioned how valuable the MLOps platforms and doing MLOps within certain lines of business has dramatically turn things around for them. And in his words, he's like, well, everyone in our organization just needs to understand, how to move in that direction and get really good with MLOps, right? And I share that story because I just love the mindset, right, of our customers who are really starting to understand how important, how critical it is. But also understand that there's going to be some patience and there's a journey ahead of them.
Yeah, and to that point, and maybe to ask a leading question because this is the Agile World podcast. It's not an all at once kind of process, right? I mean, so what is the what does a typical process look like to walk through from to get to an end point? And I would assume even the end point is not a static thing either. But what does it kind of look like to go from start to implementation?
Again, I kind of mentioned earlier, but we have this approach around this business modernization journey. Internally, we call it our business modernization framework. And really, it starts with understanding, we've talked about this a little bit, but it really starts with, in this framework, we start with understanding the business and the business goals and then really helping define those strategic things, right? Again, letting that the focus on business and delivery agility really drive a lot of those decisions, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of decisions have to be made, and we need to focus on those and get through those very quickly. But we move from that business, those business decisions that have to be made, and that strategy around that. And again, Greg, we're again from an agile perspective, we're looking at how to do those at a smaller scale, right, and look for those incremental improvements, right? So we're not necessarily thinking of like whole organizations, but let's take a line of business, for example, and show how we can modernize that line of business all the way through. So after the business stuff, we go through like this dive deep in a line where we really take them through understanding where they are today, the future state. We we do workshops with them, right, to get them to understand, you know, where they are today and what that future state needs to look like and how to architect and roadmap that stuff. And then we just kind of move to, like you said, right, from an agile perspective. Then we just move into incremental delivery, right? Let's roadmap things, let's plan things, let's commit to those things, and then let's just walk them through that journey, right, very incrementally, and making sure that we're hitting things like MVP and business value increments after that, right? But again, yeah, our kind of framework kind of guides people through that process. So that's typically how we do it.
Jay, thanks for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for people to keep up with what you and TEKsystems are doing in this space?
Yeah, yeah. Again, thanks, Greg, for having me on here. I enjoyed the time we had here.
Yeah.
But for sure, yeah, reach us out on TEKsystems.com, right, and also the social platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, stuff like that. Definitely look us up.
Great. Well, again, I'd like to thank Jay Mozo from TEKsystems for joining the show. Learn more about TEKsystems and their perspective at TEKsystems.com. I'm Greg Kilstrom. Thank you for listening to the Agile World. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by TEKsystems. I'm your host, Greg Kilstrom. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, from my website at theagile.world.